It's rewarding to feel like I achieved something that's, superhuman almost.
Welcome to Fulfilling Movement Artists, a podcast where we dig into the why of movement, understanding what is it about their movement that makes a movement artist feel fulfilled, and how does this fulfillment source inform their personal style. I am Dominic Lopinto, your host, and today we have with us Quan Tran, one of my original inspirations when arriving in the Bay Area, a performer, even if he has mixed feelings about performing, which we'll soon find out, and an educator of aerial dance. Quan grew up with a disdain for physical activity. You couldn't get him to run a mile. And sports? Forget about it. But dance was different. Quan explored the spaces of martial arts and dance, landing on breakdancing as a foundational art. He was part of a dance crew in college, but that faded after graduation, along with his movement. It was not until 4 years ago that Quan started back up as an aerial artist in a pole studio. Now, specializing in Lyra, or aerial hoop, he has performed in multiple shows and teaches 2 classes, one of which is a curriculum of his own conception, Foundational Building Blocks. Quan's perspective and today's conversation focus on 2 core motivators of his movement and changes we experience in what fulfills us. He speaks to his own experience as he has grown as a movement artist. As always, I start with the question, what is a movement artist?
That's a good question. I guess movement artist, I've also heard it called artist athlete. To me, using your body in a way that's artistic. It doesn't necessarily have to be athletic, but it can. And by artistic as in a non-practical sense, right? It's not like you're competing to get the best time or the longest distance and stuff like that. With art, as an artist, it's not really a measurable thing. It's very difficult to measure it, but you can definitely describe it in terms of other human expressions and emotions and stuff.
Okay. So not competition-based.
It can be competition-based, but you're not trying to reach, I think generally as an artist, you're not trying to reach these metrics in the same sense that you get from sports. There's other types of metrics, like maybe I want to complete 3 performances by the end of the year or something like that. There is art, there is competition in art in general, where you can focus on technique and cleanliness and lines and I guess people's judgment of your expression. But a lot of that is very subjective.
I'm hearing the focus is more so on the creation as to the comparison.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think a lot of times in art, you can compare different artists, but you're not comparing them in, not necessarily in a competitive way, more of just a stylistic way. You're comparing how one person speaks or does their art versus another, but you're never like, oh, this one is definitely better than the other one because of these exact numbers. It's pretty hard to compare artists, especially once artists reach a certain caliber. It's pretty hard to say one is better than the other. You might like one more than the other, like it appeals to you more than the other, but there's not this exact science to being an artist.
Awesome. I like that perspective. That being said, what is your movement art?
My movement art. My movement art background, it's a lot. So I would say I dance. Dance is my movement art. So all things dance. Actively right now, I'm doing aerial dance or circus dance. So there were other kids in my high school that would break dance in the hallways after class. Mm-hmm. So I would join them. And that's where I really picked up the dancing part. So that was my first intro to dance because it was very music influenced. Yes, it's still a lot of tricks and combos, but it's rooted in music. It doesn't matter how flashy of a move you can do. If it has nothing to do with the music, then it's not dance, right? That's what really drew to me. And music has always been an important part of my life. Towards the end of my breakdancing, I got really into raving, gloving or finger dancing. I tried orbiting, I tried poi, I tried whatever I could get my hands on if I could get my hands on it. But I took a really long break from dancing in general for years. I was like, oh, I gotta grow up and focus on getting a career and doing adult things. Yeah, it was gross. I had this perception that dance was unrealistic. It's only for people who did dance professionally, did dance, as a college major. And even then, if you decide to do a college major in dance, you're probably not going to get a job and do well with your life. That was the impression that I got growing up. My parents were like, you got to be a doctor or a lawyer. Those are the only two professions it could be. Through pole is when I discovered the whole aerial world, trying Lyra, trying silks, and hanging apparatuses for the first time.
We do have a picture of you doing your Lyra.
Yeah.
And this is the one that you currently land on when you perform your dance?
I don't know. It's my primary. I would say it's my primary. It's my go-to. It's the one I'm most familiar with.
Here's Quan on his Lyra. Those of you listening in, you can't see. But describe a Lyra for our listeners.
Yeah. So Lyra is a steel hoop. It's actually a steel bar that's in a complete circle. So instead of a straight bar that you might see on like a pull-up bar, monkey bars, or trapeze, it's completely a circle. And on the top or wherever, you just hang it from a rigging point. There's actually other variations of Lyra. You can have a lollipop Lyra, which is on top of a pole. So instead of hanging, it's actually a ground apparatus. It's no longer a hanging apparatus. That's essentially Lyra, just a metal circle that you can climb and do cool tricks with.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
You finally made it out to Lyra and other aerial arts, aerial silks. Thanks for sharing that history. An interesting journey for sure. A lot of elements buried in there around parts that you enjoyed. I thought it was quite interesting, that dynamic of how you went from not enjoying physical activity to finding these expressions of yourself that made it more enjoyable. And the point that you're at now, do you enjoy the physical activity that you do?
Yeah, I love it. Like, it feels so rewarding to do physical activity, especially through dance, right? So I really enjoy it. I probably should, but I haven't gone back to like a regular gym in a long time. And
I don't do that either.
Yeah. And if I do, I'm the guy on like the pull-up bar doing like practicing like my skin the cats and stuff. So I'm like practicing meat hooks at a normal gym. So yeah,
meat hooks will screw. I don't even know if we want to just get into that one. That's it's an aerial move. Just know that, listeners. Same goes for skin dick. You can look these up online if you want to see.
Pretty gnarly names for aerial moves.
Fair point.
Yeah, pretty graphic.
I've retrospectively added in videos of Quan demonstrating a meat hook and skin the cat, and this will be uploaded as part of the podcast on YouTube. The same is the case as we move to talk about Quan's most fulfilling movement, as you'll find out later in the conversation. So, here you are, an aerial artist, an aerial dancer. We're moving to the section of the podcast where we talk about fulfillment. And you spoke to this subtly, whether you realize it or not, in your history. Reflect on the ways that you move now. What is it about the way that you move? What is it about the movement art that brings you a sense of fulfillment?
I think a lot of movement art that I find fulfilling is that I move in the way I want, in a way that feels relatively natural. I mean, it's pretty unnatural to be climbing up like a metal bar and doing weird tricks on it. It's pretty unnatural, but it feels natural, right? I think that's an important aspect of it, is that it feels natural to me. It feels right to me, and something that feels like I'm willing to work hard for to get a return that feels right for me. Might not necessarily be right for other people, but the working hard and physically achieving and manifesting something that's like, that I can do with my body. And it's sort of intangible also. Some art, you create tangible goods, and that's really awesome. But this one, the only tangible thing is you actually doing the move and maybe getting a picture or a video of it. But it's not something that, once you do it, it's not like something that you've captured and you can hold in your hands and really appreciate it, right? You can only remember that experience or see a picture or video of it and then have flashbacks of it. It's all in your mind, and it's a very unique experience that you can only achieve by doing it.
That's awesome. I heard two things. The creation of that intangible experience, that intangible thing in your mind, and that's what you're getting out, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the reward, that return that you're talking about?
Yeah.
It sounds like that's the most pointed, and then something that doesn't require too much effort to get to that point.
Mm, yes and no. I think it does require a lot of effort. I think the effort is also extremely rewarding. If I want a move, I'm going to have to strength train for it.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to physically reach these like benchmarks and goals is really rewarding. It's rewarding to feel like I achieved something that's, superhuman almost. The average person, it just feels like I've moved past a limitation, just not a human limitation, but a limitation of myself also.
Look at that.
That's extremely fulfilling. And as I get older and I feel like certain parts of me are breaking, the wear and tear feels more intense.
For real.
It's still really refreshing that I can meet these like breakthroughs.
Awesome. That reminds me of a concept known as flow. Essentially, that level of difficulty that it provides enough of a challenge where you have to put in your full self and all of your effort towards achieving it, but you're still able to meet that difficulty. That's what I'm hearing in part, is that it meets that level of difficulty, because I'm sure that once you've progressed, once you've developed that skin the cat, once you've developed those meat hooks, now you can do that. But in order to have that same return, is it just as rewarding every time when you do one of those, or do you have to go a step further?
That's a good point. I think a lot of times is going a step further, but there's a plateau at some point. Like I can only improve it by so much. Sure, the next step after skin the cat is probably a back lever or a back flag. But how many more tricks can I just keep adding on top of it before it's just trick grinding? So that part of that complements the creation part. What use is doing a meat hook or skin the cat if I can't throw it in some sort of expression? Not necessarily performance. I generally don't like performing, but just that expression of the creative aspects of it. And I think this goes back to before I did breakdancing, doing cool tricks and martial arts or tricking was really fun. But it wasn't until I complemented movement with music that I really, really found this, I don't know, this synergetic effect with it that really was fulfilling.
I'm seeing fulfillment in multiple areas. You have the difficult, that trial that you break through in order to get a new skill. That's that initial feeling of fulfillment. And then you get a secondary repeated ability to get that fulfillment through the subsequent creation of these mental experiences that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is enhanced by this musical synergy with your movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really incredible.
Yeah, it's been life-changing.
All right. While we're on this topic of fulfillment and we're taking a deep dive, select one move. If there was a single move that you perform, carry out, maybe you don't like performing. If there's a single move that you've accomplished that you can repeatedly do, maybe you can't even repeat it, maybe you could just do it once. What is that move that is most fulfilling to you?
It's flares and moves based off flares. Granted, there's a lot of moves that when I learned it and do it, I feel incredible. Like when I first learned a back flag, like I lost my mind. I felt amazing because it's a scary move, but it felt really good. But flares are just so fun, and there's always ways to progress it. So that's why I haven't gotten bored of it, I think. You can always get better with it, two hand, one hand, flare to inverts, flare to other stuff. And I really like it because it's dynamic. It uses momentum in a controlled way to get you where you want to be. Instead of just doing continuous flares, you're using a flare to get to end goal. I like using the flare as the move, but more of a transition to my other moves.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that. And I think it also stems from breakdancing. I really like ground flares and windmills. And so when I learned you can do that in the air, I was like, this is awesome.
You were able to ground flare?
I did a few times. Like it wasn't the cleanest, but yeah, I used to be able to ground flare. I don't think I could do it anymore, but I used to do windmills pretty consistently.
All right. So our listeners are dying to understand what a flare is.
Well,
is it possible to explain this through words.
A flare? Using words to describe movement. That's a whole nother okay. So a flare is where if you're hanging from an apparatus, let me take a step back. A ground flare you commonly see gymnasts do on a horse or a platform where they place their hands down and swing their legs around their hands, but never let their legs touch the ground. So you're in a straddle or a wide split position and you're swinging your hips around your arms and your arms are just lifting up and going down back to the ground and your legs are never touching the ground. So that's your ground flare. A flare off a aerial apparatus is very similar, but you're hanging. So as you're hanging, you're swinging your legs or kicking your legs around in a circle to generate momentum to use to kick across your body, and then you swing it up, which lifts your hips up. So the flare move is a way to transition using momentum from free hanging, to you're bringing your hips up through the motion of a circle, like a circle-ish kick.
And I encourage all of you listening to this to look up ground flares, look up flares in gymnastics, look up aerial dance flares, and I'm sure that there's something online. But I'd say that was pretty good. I like how you started with gymnastics.
Yeah, I think more people have seen that than aerial flare, or either gymnastics or breakdancing. I'm sure that people have seen it, but just didn't know what it was called.
If you can imagine what they do in the Olympics, and then instead of pushing down, hanging, and doing that same movement with your legs.
Yeah.
Pretty funny.
Yeah.
Getting back to fulfillment, that second piece that you talked about through fulfillment, which was the creation. It enables you to implement this aesthetically intricate move. Actually, you even bridged to talk about how you're feeling when you're carrying out the move, which is this flow sense. And it doesn't sound like that's necessarily a sense of difficulty. Is that a balanced difficulty to articulate your body in that way while flaring at this point?
Yes and no. I think the difficulty comes when I want to like advance the flare to like a more difficult version, which I'm always working on. But when doing a flare I'm comfortable with, I think the difficulty isn't there in the front of my mind. I think the difficulty was the journey of getting there. It's no longer difficult, but it was quite difficult to get to where I am.
Okay. That history, because it also traces back all the way to your breakdancing days. As
yeah, it does. It goes all the way back there. But because of the difficulty of overcoming the obstacles to get to this move, now it gives me a much more flexible freedom in like the creation, where like I can make the move my way, and I can go into another move afterwards in the way like I feel comfortable or that makes sense to me.
When you first broke through your flares, did you put a lot of effort and dedication into reaching that point in breakdancing?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a mix, there's that whole thing where like, oh, beginner's luck, or like when you start learning something, you tend to learn something really fast and really well. Well is debatable, but you learn things really fast. And so I think that was part of it too, was like, well, I'm just going to wing it. If I wing it enough times, I'll get it. So I think the dedication of constantly winging it was good. But looking back on it, if I had better discipline and better maturity that I have now, like I would have done conditioning moves, very specific drills to focus on it. But instead, I just like tried the same move over and over again. And I think the persistence is what got me there. And I think persistence is very important and will get you most of the way there. But being persistent with consciousness, like being much more conscious of what I'm doing, would have definitely made it a lot easier.
Did that persistence and that dedication early on contribute to the fulfillment when you finally reached this move?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Do you think that carries through to today, having that associated breakthrough, that associated dedication early on? So this is something that you've developed from early. You now bring it to the space of the aerial, and you can maintain that same sense of accomplishment through this aerial form.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it really depends on like what my goals are. Is it to learn a new move? is it to just get stronger and do impossible moves, or is it to like do, you know, specific performances, specific expressions, stuff like that. So my goals are constantly changing. I think a lot of my initial aerial journey was that persistency of like, I want to stick to this and just reach those breakthrough moments because it's so fulfilling. It feels amazing when you hit these moments. But I think with most things, there's some sort of diminishing returns. Yeah, I'll still continue focusing on that because it is important to get better, right? Technically, but I've also started to look for fulfillment in other ways that isn't just a direct through traditional. I'm just gonna grind until I get it kind of work, kind of habits.
Yeah, that shows a development, a growth in what brings you fulfillment as well. Because early on it was that accomplishment, as you're saying, and now it sounds like it's shifting towards more so that ladder of that creation piece, and this opens up multiple doors, multiple avenues for you to use this single move to create many things. Am I on track here, or what are your thoughts?
I mean, that's definitely on track, but even beyond the physical like difficulty part and then the creation part, there's like new fulfillment that I'm finding through things other than that. For example, like I recently started teaching, and so that's like a whole new layer of fulfillment that's like completely different, right? So teaching and being part of a sense of community. I think the community and finding like, you know, a third space is really has always been important to me. I just didn't know about it.
Did you just say a third space?
Yeah.
What is that?
So a third space is, it's not your home, it's not your work, and it's a place where you spend a lot of time at, and it's where you find like your sense of community, your sense of self there. And so that's what's considered a third space, because your home is your home, right? There's a very specific atmosphere around it, and your work, like your work's your work. You're not going to be able to find, you're going to find work fulfillment, but there's a lot of other fulfillment that you can't find at your workplace. And so a third space is like this extra one that's not your home, not your work, and you can find a different kind of fulfillment and a much more sense of community, because a home community and a work community are very different things that you don't find at like a third space.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm looking for that too. Style. So the final section of this podcast is around your style. What is it about the way that you move? And I'll bring fulfillment back into this in a little bit. But what is it about the way that you move that makes your movement arts you?
I never had to think about this. I like dynamic movement. It's always been very captivating to me, so therefore I internalize it. So I like being very dynamic, which doesn't necessarily mean fast. It just means constant movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of my movement is around that, just being very dynamic.
Let's take a theoretical here. Say that someone was watching two Silks artists, or we'll take Lyra since that's your primary, right? Two Lyra artists dancing, performing, whatever you want to call it, practicing your apparatus, your Lyra, but it's completely shaded out, your silhouettes, and you can't see your hair because you have a very specific style of hair. From the movements, would you be able to tell that it's you?
I hope so. That's
why. How?
I mean, I think you know, like I said earlier, a huge part of dancing is moving the way I like feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, a lot of my influences is through everyone I've seen and encountered and stuff like that. So I think if you watch me, you might see a little bit of everyone else I've seen before. But I think a lot of it is being dynamic, doing a lot of tricks that maybe are like rolls or drops with a lot of speed variations. So like, you know, move, and then pose.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it comes from my breakdance background. So it's always been like move to the music, kill the beat. So always hit the beat when you're moving, do cool, like dynamic power moves. But when the beat ends, when that 8 count phrase, 4 count, or how many count phrase, when it ends, you hold it. And so I really enjoyed that style of movement and phrasing. So I generally don't like pose, hold, pose, hold. That's just not my thing. Plus, I don't really do good splits, so I don't really do that. But killing the beat at the end is like what I always aim for. So it doesn't matter what I'm doing before. Like I could be messing up, I could be fast, I could be dynamic, I could just be spazzing out. But as long as I hit that beat at the end, I think that's something that's I very internalize and try to make it my style. It's obviously other people's styles too, but that's something that I really want. And then so that way that there's just that synergetic effect of like doing a difficult move at the right time to the music, right? So it feels good for me, but then the audience will connect the dots like all at once.
That sounds pretty uniquely stylistic. Yeah, the intention behind that as well. I've certainly heard that hitting the beat is a common thing, but recognizing that stems also from your breakdancing. So you have that stylistic influence, that history behind your movements. Pretty solid. Let's just connect the dots here ourselves. Is this style of dynamic movements and hitting the beats, is that influenced by what brings you a sense of fulfillment?
Yeah. I've never really thought about it until you asked now. But as we were saying earlier, the two big parts of fulfillment that I've gone through was the grind and the difficulty and just getting moves, right? Persistency, but then also the creation part. And so I think the style is like the constant buildup, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the buildup and then hitting it. So that's kind of reflective of how I approach like my movement art. You grind, which could represent like the first 7, 8 counts, right? And then on the 8 count is like nailing that move that I've worked so hard for. But this is all in coordination with like the creation and of the music and so forth.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's like a reportrayal of your whole journey to fulfillment in a single set of moments.
Yeah.
In a single experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Never thought about it that way, but I think that's how I would metaphorically say it.
So that is all I have for today. Awesome chat here. I don't know if you have anything else, anything else that comes to mind that might be applicable that might be sitting there. I'll give you a second to think about it if you want to share anything else.
I mean, the only thing I think of is fulfillment changes. Like you may not find fulfillment in the same thing all the time, or shape shifts, not necessarily change, because I get bored of things pretty easily. And I used to try a lot of different things. As you've heard, I've tried a lot of different movement backgrounds, but it's finding a medium and then shifting the fulfillment around it, like how I find fulfillment around it. So the medium now is aerial dance, and the way I find fulfillment is, the difficulty, the flow, the getting the moves, the creation. Now it's kind of supporting and becoming a teacher, like helping the community out, being really rewarded when students get moves, and then the challenge of trying to pass on what I've learned and what has fulfilled me, and hoping that other people find fulfillment through the same medium and in maybe not the exact same way, but finding their own way of fulfillment. Same.
I've seen that in my own life for sure. Wise. Well, it's been great having you, Quan, as a guest here on our podcast. Thanks for sharing your experiences, insights around your fulfillment, and for digging into yourself also, exploring that with me. It's been cool to see that discovery process and that connecting at the dots. I've learned a few things.
Yeah, thanks.
Like shooting off a flare in the night, Quan shines a decorative light on the dynamic influences that breakdancing can add to an aerial dancer's style. He is driven by the ability to exceed self-perceived limits, to create a journey, a build-up, musically synchronized with movement, that leads to a powerful punch, a metaphor which alludes to the dedication and hard work that makes a breakthrough to a new dynamic skill possible. If you have enjoyed hearing Quan's story, you can follow Caffeine High on Instagram. That's spelled QAFFEINE_HIGH. If you've heard something you could apply to your own movement, let me know at FlyFlipFlow. And press that share button to send this to someone who may enjoy joining the conversation, so we can continue to explore the art of movement and find fulfillment through the movement artist in each of us. After recording this podcast, I had the opportunity to learn flares from Quan.
So start generate some spin. Generate some spin hammer. Start looping so that once you see the hammer, start looping so that it keeps you in place. Yeah, good. And so do the flare. You're gonna do a hula hoop. Do the flare. You're gonna do a hula hoop and then fan kick. So you want to keep your legs and instead of doing just a hula hoop, as you do that, and trace your legs just a hula hoop into. You're gonna trace your legs, circle walk around, and then go up. Circle walk around, and then go up. Yeah. And if you're doing flares, you're imagining you're drawing. If you're doing flares, but you're imagining you're drawing physically. So like you're going around. So you're going up, around, and then up. So your figure eight is bent in half. So your figure eight is bent in half. Okay. Nice. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Yeah. Would you like to invert completely? Yeah, you can. Would you like to invert completely? Yeah, you can. All right. Good stuff. All right. Nice. Good stuff. Yeah.